Well, howdy, howdy, everyone. It's your friend Lauren Musica, attorney and human rights advocate. I also serve as president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest sidewalk outreach organization. And this is the Lauren Musica Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. So honored once again to have you hanging out with me. You know, I've often thought in the abortion battle, I wish that we could hear about abortion from someone that we'll never get to hear from, and that is the baby, the clear victim in this battle. Around the time that I began thinking about that a handful of years ago, a group emerged that stopped me in my tracks and changed the abortion debate forever. And that was the Abortion Survivors Network. Apparently, this is an ever growing group because sometimes, believe it or not, an abortion procedure fails more than we realize. And we are blessed and lucky in that to have an incredible, irreplaceable human life go on to live a full, beautiful life that they are deserving of. The leader of this group is none other than the famous Melissa Ohden, now a dear friend and colleague of mine. She has now testified before Congress several times and is traveling the world sharing the experience of abortion survivors. And she's here today to share her story and her thoughts on the battle before us and where we as a nation go from here. So let's go ahead and introduce our special guest. Melissa Ohden is the founder and director of the Abortion Survivors Network and the Abortion Survivors Network Education and Policy Center. She is a master's level prepared social worker with experience in the fields of mental health, substance abuse treatment, domestic violence and sexual assault counseling, and child welfare. She is the survivor of a failed saline infusion abortion in 1977, which is documented in her medical records, medical professionals she has been connected with over the years, and even her birth mother, Ruth, has affirmed this experience. Like so many abortion stories, Ruth's and Melissa's were much more painful than anyone, including Melissa's adoptive parents, could have imagined. Ruth was forced to abort Melissa at the age of 19 and spent over 30 years believing that the abortion had been successful, that it had been completed. Melissa's survival and placement for adoption had been kept a secret from her. Melissa and Ruth are now a part of one another's lives. Wow. Melissa and her family reside in Kansas City, Missouri. Let's go ahead and welcome to the program, Melissa Ohden. Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Great. Thank you.
Oh, so good to have you with us. Thank you for joining me for this incredible discussion. This is so needed. I'm so thankful to see your face all over the nation, all over the world, testifying in Congress. Your testimony is so needed. So let's go ahead and jump right in. You know, the other side loves to say this is a made up thing, right? That abortion survivors really don't exist, that we don't even have a need for the, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, which is before Congress right now at the time of the recording of the show, which we're going to talk about more here in just a minute. But what do you say to that, Melissa?
It's dehumanizing. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how long I've been doing this work, it never ceases to
Mhm.
amaze me how low people will stoop to
Yeah.
have members of Congress, right? Senator Cory Booker, Senator Chuck Schumer post on social media the week of the Born Alive vote, which was also, inauguration week, March for Life week, to have them post, I'll say the clean version, essentially crap that isn't real is what
Great.
they posted on X. And they get
Yeah.
away with it, Lauren. And this is not the first time, and I know it won't be the last time, but my role as the leader and the mama bear that protects my survivors and mothers and
Yeah.
families, whether I know them or not, I'm not afraid of them and I'm not going to let them get away with it. It is disrespectful and dehumanizing. So, yeah, I jumped straight in on that. And, first of all, had a lot to say, but let them know, like, hey, sign me up. I would be honored to review the
Yeah.
research with you and bring in survivors. Like, how about you hear from us? How about you read the research before you straight out deny that we exist?
Unbelievable. I don't even know how someone can argue with your real human story, you know? Um, Take us back, Melissa, to the time that you found out that you were an abortion survivor. Like, what was that like to find that out? And then what did you do after that?
Makes it all so painful
Yeah.
is not only being the leader of this organization that advocates for the people who are the intended victims of abortion and who, right, in many ways are victimized, even though we survive.
Yeah.
To put myself then in the shoes of the person who also was the victim and then be dehumanized, right? I sort of have like these layers every single day that I'm battling. And
Mhm.
when I am dehumanized, they are dehumanizing my parents who adopted me, afraid
Mhm.
of the truth hurting me. They're dehumanizing my birth mom. They're dehumanizing our family and clinic workers and all those people. And, what I want is for them to have to sit in my shoes and remember what it was like to be 14 and
Mhm.
to be told by my mother that I survived an abortion. I grew up knowing I was adopted. Adoption was very much the fabric of my family. I can't tell you when I first found out I was adopted because that's just how normal it was. And I grew up knowing that my birth parents loved me enough to give me the gift of my family when they couldn't care for me. And so to find out at the age of 14 by accident and my mom to have to tell me it was something I will never forget. It's like you're a little kid on the playground and you're on the swing and you fall off the swing and you hit the ground and the wind gets knocked out of you and you can't
Yeah.
breathe, right? And you're checking yourself out. You're like, something hurts, everything hurts. Did I break something? I still feel that at the
Yeah.
age of 47. 30 years later, I can tell you that I can still feel in my body that the wind got knocked out of me. And so when they attack us, right, they're dismissing our pain.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And why do you think I don't even have this in my notes. This is just what's rising to the top of my heart right now. Why are they so threatened by you? Why do they seem so threatened by your testimony? What would you say to those members of Congress who would love to pretend that you don't exist or that you don't have a voice in this battle?
I mean, we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And that is that it's a slippery slope. Once you admit that there are people who survived abortion procedures, then you have to admit that it's not a clump of cells, it's actually a baby. So
Right.
we are just simply right caught in this game of political chess for them.
Mhm.
But that's why it's so important that we do have members of Congress like Senator Lankford and Speaker Johnson, folks who our survivors got to spend a lot of time with on the Hill during the Born Alive vote. I had 8 survivors who got to meet Speaker Johnson and Whip Emmer and Congressman Scalise, incredible leaders in this fight. And they were in the gallery when the House was undergoing the vote. It's hard to hear the people who are fighting against you and dehumanizing you. But at the same time, Lauren, there's something so incredibly empowering about seeing the leaders who are willing to see you, acknowledge you, and share your story. That
Yeah.
is that is where I think I have such hope right now. Something happened that week that I've never seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what hits me is that you are the thing that just completely shoots down their argument, right? It's scary to them. Their storyline, what they're defending. They can't look at you and not have their entire argument defeated, right? So it's not a wonder to me that they consider you guys such a threat and they fight against you. They don't even want you speaking most of the time, from what
Right.
I hear. And it's so important that you do keep speaking and keep giving witness to what you guys have been through. It's amazing. Um, what is, Melissa, the biggest misconception about abortion survivors? I know some people have even tried to claim that they're part of your community and they're really not, right? And then what does the other side typically say about you, just to unpack that a little bit more? And what do you really want the world to understand about abortion survivors?
Misconceptions about abortion survivors, even in the pro-life movement, which I
Yeah.
think is sort of interesting considering that we are a very diverse group of people who, by and large, are very grassroots and have been in, the thick of things for a long time. But And I think
Mm.
historically, I mean, and right, part of the problem is when we are told that abortion is always successful, and even the concept of born alive legislation is that without medical care, babies don't survive, even though they first survived, right? So it's sort of
Mm.
complicated, but it's complicated no matter what. But the reality is it's sort of twofold. So I think the greatest misconception is just how this even happens.
Yeah.
And so what I've loved here recently is doing even more work with right APLOG and other pro-life doctors and hearing them talk about how late-term abortions happen, right? How they're performed, and then how that in and of itself then begets the opportunity for a baby to survive the procedure, right? We have to
Mm.
really slow down, which is hard
Yeah.
from a messaging standpoint when we're getting slaughtered all the time by the
Mm.
abortion lobby. But if we can slow down and say, okay, right, here's how late term abortions are performed. And here's how
Yeah.
then this leads to the opportunity for born alive infant. And here's what happens, right? There are a couple paths forward. And then we can say the fact that there are people alive to share their story doesn't mean that they're all provided medical care, right? This is a particular subset of the entire population who were, yes, then provided medical care and have lived to tell the story. Because, right, that's one of those arguments is, well, the fact that you're here means that this kind of legislation isn't needed.
Hmm.
No, I we're an anomaly, right? We are
Yeah.
a very small portion of the entire population of abortion survivors. And that's the hard part about my story is, you know what, I wasn't immediately provided medical care. And again, this is where people
Mm.
get so uncomfortable and they go, no, she's got to be lying.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, and I know that in your community, there are people who have, because they weren't provided medical care right away, or there was just something they couldn't do, when this precious life was delivered and left there for a bit, right? Like I think of Josiah who lost his arm because of abortion, right? Gianna Jessen has cerebral palsy and some other challenges because of just being left on the side, on the table, and then they finally provided her life-saving medical care, right? Can you speak to that just a little bit more that, like you said, this is an anomaly. You guys are walking miracles, and sometimes there's a delay in giving care, and people are scrambling trying to figure out what to do, right?
Yeah, and I think again, that's one of those sort of not necessarily a misconception, but one of those
Yeah.
things that unless you are living in this world that I live in and I work in, you you can't really even begin to think about what this looks like. So let me give you a few examples, Lauren. For
Yeah.
Josiah, for instance. So Josiah spoke at the March for Life, and he's an amazing man, pastor, father, has been,
Mm.
he's missing part of his arm because of a curettage abortion. So,
Yeah.
right, was
Mm.
born with the injury from an abortion. I
Yeah.
was texting a survivor in our network who is the director of a pregnancy center. She didn't find out her story until she met her birth mom. And
Mm.
her adoptive parents were pretty much told, hey, you're not going to ask any questions about all of these slash marks that this baby you're adopting has all over her torso, right? Do not ask questions. Turns out
Mm.
it was a DNC. And, we'll probably never
Mm.
know if there was another baby in the womb that maybe made the abortionist think that they had done their job, but she was
Yeah.
born with all of these injuries.
Yeah.
And, that was one of the things that I was saying last week or, during the March for Life, I was saying to people is, we shouldn't have to tell you our story for
Mm.
you to believe this, right? We shouldn't have to tell you every ounce of our pain in
Yeah.
order to be acknowledged. But that is sort of this role that we're put in all the time is like, oh, you say you're an abortion survivor, prove it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
It's ripping off our band-aids, right?
Yeah.
And the beauty in that for me as a leader is that with the right level of healing support and community support and just right ongoing attention that we provide as an organization, our survivors can begin to do some of this work, showing
Yeah.
up and sharing their story in their face. But it's really, really hard. I was talking to a mom early on in the week of the March for Life, the mom of, a little, I say little girl, she's 13. Sorry, girl, you're not little in their mind, but you are to me. She survived a late term abortion performed at 27 weeks in Serbia, spent
Wow.
6 years in an orphanage before she was adopted and brought to the United States. And you know what, Lauren, she looks just like you and me, right? When you would look at
Yeah.
her, but you would never know her internal struggles. Our
Yeah.
survivors who deal with, low self-worth, identity issues,
Mm.
suicidal ideations, right? All because we were rejected.
Yeah.
Whatever the circumstances were that our mothers were going through, ultimately we were rejected. And now
Mm.
we live in a culture that rejects us.
Mm. Doesn't want to hear from you because it defeats their argument and they can't stand that. Defeats their worldview, right? And that's exactly why
Mhm.
you guys have to keep speaking. Wow. Yeah. Unbelievable. It's so much to get your mind around. And the
Mhm.
idea
Yeah.
too
So,
that,
yeah,
right?
the
Yeah.
survivor experience is very diverse. So
Yeah.
I see survivors who are surviving at every gestation, not just late term, right? That's why I say this
Mm.
is one subset of the population. Born alive legislation protects a very vulnerable part of the survivor population. Those
Yeah.
who are surviving late term abortions and are highly vulnerable to not being provided medical care. All in the name of like compassion, right? I'm seeing that
Mm.
now from the other side. They're essentially saying, this sort of legislation is so right incompassionate to families who are having that late term abortion because because there is something wrong with the baby. And so
Yeah.
somehow inducing labor and intending for them to not survive it or leave them to die is compassionate.
Mm.
There is not a single survivor, Lauren, in the over 900 that we have connected with where that was the experience, that they were aborted because of a health anomaly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I see
Absolutely.
babies who survive chemical abortions at 6 weeks. We see, especially in today's world, we see babies who are surviving multiple rounds of abortion drugs, follow
Mm.
up surgical procedures. And every mother's experience is very different in terms of, how long did they spend thinking the abortion had been successful? And did
Wow.
they receive follow up care after that? Did they ever go to a pregnancy center? Did they tell their OB that they had had an attempted abortion? Were they
Mm.
put on bed rest? When they gave birth, did anybody know that there was an attempted abortion? By and large, no.
Wow. Yeah. Really something to think about. And, it just occurred to me some people may be listening to this. They're not familiar with what the standard of care is in our various states when a baby is born alive after an abortion. Can you speak to that right now? I mean, obviously, this is before Congress. That's what we're talking about. And when we say the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, right? There's legislation right now on the table. It's moved through the House, it's now in the hands of the Senate. But talk to us a little bit about state by state, this kind of piecemeal standard, so to speak, that we have across the nation, if at all, really, right? In many
Yeah.
respects.
And,
Yeah.
again, that's sort of a common misconception, even in the pro life movement, is, people will say, well, didn't President Bush sign something in 2002
Mm,
regarding born alive infants? And that is indeed true. President Bush did, but it was simply sort of a definitions bill saying, right,
yeah.
babies who survive abortions are human beings, just like any
Mm,
other child. There was no teeth to that, no consequence for failure to provide medical care, and really
interesting.
no no encouragement to report. And when you go back even to the 1970s and early 1980s, you can see that the CDC's abortion surveillance made it clear of like, right, there is no reason why you would want to be reporting the incidence of born alive infants. It's like reporting yourself to the IRS for an audit. Why would
Mm,
you do that? And so I need people to
Right.
understand it through that lens, is that for decades, the abortion industry and abortionists have known, like, we don't want the public to know this because, woof, there would be a lot of clamor about this. So
Yeah.
that takes us to 2002, definitions bill, no consequence. And then you start to see leadership at the federal level taking this up, and they needed to. But what people aren't
Mm.
thinking about is, you know what, it's been blocked over 80 sometimes, right, before Congress. And during that time, yes, babies have been still left to die. We have very few states that report out even the number. And then you see
Yeah.
those states who do. And Minnesota, under Governor Tim Walz, right, revoked that. So took
Mm.
away their born alive reporting, which did identify babies who were surviving abortions. And right, so therefore, no reporting, no consequence. And it's sort of
Yeah.
like this cycle continues, right? Of like, this doesn't happen. And P.S., we're not going to have any standard of reporting or care. So the people aren't going to live to tell their story.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's a
Wow.
huge need, huge need.
Yeah. Yeah. Melissa, do you have like a ballpark idea about how much this happens across the United States? Like, I literally am getting flooded with memories right now. Like, as I've worked with, for example, Abby Johnson's
Mhm.
abortion worker ministry, and then there were none, talking to workers as they're healing, as they're taking their journey out of the abortion industry into the arms of the pro life movement, into the arms of Christ. And they're telling us this happened in their facility, especially those who worked in late term facilities. So, do you have any kind of guesstimation, because the reporting requirements are so weak, if they're there at all, right, about how much this is really going on?
Really hard to get to the numbers when we know that we don't even get accurate abortion reporting stats. But I can
Yeah,
tell you
it's fair.
that that's part of what we're committed to as an organization, saying, let us try to find an answer to this. And so
Yeah.
the best answer we've gotten is by looking at other countries and their abortion failure rates. So people could go to our website, abortionsurvivors.org. Under the resources page, we have different spots of resources for moms whose abortions don't go the
Mhm.
way they plan. We have resources for medical professionals, adoption professionals, and we have a ton of research. And so when you go to the research page, you'll actually find the best research we have comes out of Canada. And they
Mm.
identify the number of surgical abortions that fail. And when our research associate, Elena, went through that data, she found time and time again that the surgical abortion failure rate in Canada was 0.21%. So when you think about
Wow.
late term abortions, that's a surgical abortion by and large. So 0.21%, pretty consistently, 0.20 to 0.22, but really lands on 0.21. Interestingly enough, Australia has a very similar failure rate of their surgical abortions.
Hmm.
Not surprising. So when you correlate that to the United States, a 0.21% surgical abortion failure rate looked like at the last reporting period 1,734 surgical abortion survivors in 1 year. Realize
Wow.
that doesn't include successful abortion pill reversal. That doesn't include at home attempt survivors. That doesn't include chemical abortions that straight up are failing. So the number is high. You're talking thousands of survivors a year.
Yeah.
And the number is consistently continuing to get higher. If folks look at
Hmm.
that research, right, that's one of those arguments that I typically hear from members of Congress. This doesn't happen anymore. Well, that's really interesting because if you actually look at the best research out there, the numbers keep getting higher and higher in recent
Mhm.
years in Canada instead of being reduced. And I think one of the most impactful research studies for me this past year, and I know Christina Francis, Dr. Francis, has found it very eye opening as well, is that there was a study of second trimester abortions, second trimester. And in a sample of nearly 14,000 in Quebec, nearly 14,000, they had an 11.2% failure rate.
Oh my goodness.
But yet we're
Wow.
told this doesn't happen. These babies were somehow incompatible with life, right? Fill in the
Yeah.
blank.
Mm. Mm.
The research is pretty clear.
Industrialized nation right there. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's, and then the the next thought is how many of those babies received life sustaining care? How many were just left to die? Right. And we'll
Right.
never know the answer to that. So,
Right. And,
mm,
in that particular study, I was honestly a little bit surprised that about 24% made it to the NICU. I mean, but isn't that awful
okay.
that I have to say that? Ooh,
Wow.
I'm happy with
24%.
24%. No, I'm not happy with it.
Right.
Should be 100%. But
Right.
frankly, I was a little bit surprised that it was as high as 24%.
Interesting. But that also means on the flip side, like you're saying, about 75% never made it there. And you have some
Mhm.
big question marks as far as what was done right after that happened. I mean, I can tell you
Mhm.
as an attorney, like the at least the legal line, across industrialized nations is delivery. Like once the
Mhm.
baby is born, they're considered a person, right? But all of this is going on behind closed doors. And like you
Right.
said, it's not being reported. We have big question marks here. Wow.
And why
Just
in anybody's right mind
ugh,
would they think that a woman who is, if they want to play that card, that this woman
right.
is in such a state of duress,
Hmm.
that they would then put the woman in the position to have to make a decision under a state of duress about this baby who was born alive, who she was told wasn't really a person.
Right. Mm. Wow. And that turns that whole narrative on its head. And I know a lot of women have had to heal from that, right? When they've been put in that
Mhm.
position too. They thought that they were told by Planned Parenthood, this is what it's going to look like. It's not really a baby, right? Even well into pregnancy, women are being told this. I can say that as a sidewalk advocate, right? And then when all of this happens, it completely dispels the lies, the myths that she's been told about abortion. So, and that's traumatic for her as well, right? Again, abortion is just such a it's an act that's shrouded so much in trauma, right? At every stage, you have to dehumanize something at some stage, in order to get to where we end up quite often as a nation, as a culture. Unbelievable. Um, Talk to me, Melissa, about survivors of the abortion pill, because now we have the advent of the abortion pill reversal. We know that in the two pill chemical abortion regimen, that when a woman takes that first pill, which is what breaks down progesterone, which is feeding the baby, feeding the pregnancy, there is a high failure rate with that, depending on the stage of pregnancy. And you count these folks as being part of your community, and rightly so. What are you hearing from this special community, this special group?
I want people to know, as we're talking about this, we have an online community for moms to be a part of who are going through this because, it's so common. I know the folks on the sidewalk experience this. So many women who go through this think they're the only
Mm,
person that it happened to, right? And there's so
yeah.
much shame that I experience women going through because of it, right? Oh, I must be the only one. And right, survivors have that same sort of response. Oh, I must be the only
Mhm.
one. I mean, that for me, that's the stuff that I get righteously angry about, honestly, Lauren, of like we live in a culture that is begetting a lot of the ongoing trauma for survivors and
Mm,
moms because like if we could just have an honest conversation, then they could at least have that reduced down and we could deal with some of the other
yeah.
trauma. But instead, everybody's sort of dealing in their own silo of like, I'm the only one. So we have an online
Mm,
community. Folks can contact us. The easiest way is to email us info@abortionsurvivors.org. Folks can be added to our online community, whether they're a mom, an adoptive parent, a survivor. But I tend to find in this particular population of moms, they're finding out very quickly in the pregnancy that it wasn't successful. And so
yeah.
what we have actually found has been very hard for me as a leader because what I found is they have a lot more time to be pressured into having another abortion with that abortion survivor who's already undergone something painful. And that woman is going to have more trauma the more abortions that she has. And I think we would be so saddened if we could really recognize how many abortions are taking place in one pregnancy.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely. Absolutely. So important to know. Yeah. And I mean, I remember listening to you at an event. I want to say it was the Pro-Life Women's Conference, and it hit me. Wow, this is a big group. This is
Mhm.
an ever-growing group. Those who have survived the abortion pill. I'm so grateful for the option that Heartbeat International has given to people, with chemical abortion being the most popular form of abortion in the United States. I mean, we're handing the abortion pill reversal news out like candy. It's now part of the gift bag that we hand to women who are going into the abortion facility. This is such a wonderful thing. But, quite often the mom, the child, when they found out that this was maybe part of their story, there still needs to be healing on the other side of this. And just as you're alluding to so well, and that's why I'm so glad that you guys are there, ready to receive these moms and these families and helping them kind of work through that. I know we've got a very popular speaker in the movement, Becky Hagan. I know she's been with Heartbeat International and Vitae Foundation, and travels the country sharing her story about her son, Zachariah, that survived the chemical abortion regimen. And I know she's talked about a lot of feelings that have gone along with that. What if it had gone the other way, right? Zachariah is here, is now part of your community, right? But there's some things to work through in that regard. And again, you guys are just providing such a beautiful service to receive families on the other side of that, celebrate life, celebrate this option, but also to work through those difficult feelings that led her to that decision in the first place. It's so important.
Impacts them, right?
Yeah.
We often hear from moms who even have gone through APR and, celebrate
Mm,
the fact that their baby survived. It brings them so much joy, but at the same time, it doesn't undo the trauma of the abortion and the guilt and the shame that they feel for that.
yeah.
And, I can still remember a mom about a year ago had reached out and said, I gave birth to my baby after
Mm,
successful abortion pill reversal. And you know what? I'm overjoyed, but I thought I was doing okay. And then
mm,
when I came face to face with her, I now realize what I did.
yeah.
And it's so important, especially in a world that wants to say, hey, abortion doesn't have an impact. You can just move on. It's sort of like we all as organizations have to double down to say, no, you know what? It does impact you, and it's okay to talk about it. You're not
Yeah.
abnormal. You're not weird. Okay. This is actually normal to still be
Right.
impacted by it.
Right. Right. No, I love that. And I think about the healing ministry, really, that you guys are providing to this community and beyond, right? It's so important, and helping people to know that they're not alone and being able to work through that and find freedom in Christ, too. So beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, as we close out here, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act that's before Congress right now. When this show airs, there might be a resolution to it already, but at least at this juncture, your thoughts, as it's, I believe, now in the hands of the Senate. And then, Melissa, where do you see us going from here? We're post-Roe America, what is it, 2.5 years after the Dobbs decision. How do we get closer to an abortion-free America from where you sit?
Ooh, how much time do we have?
We solved that, we would have done it, right? That's
Yeah,
a big question, it's a big question, yeah.
yeah, I'll start with I don't know if it's the easier part of the question, but what comes next on Born Alive? Obviously,
Mm,
votes matter. They
mm,
do, right? Our votes matter. And, seeing how this is going to work its way out in the Senate, those votes do matter. But for me, Lauren, I have two main thoughts. I mean, first of all, I had more survivors on the Hill than I ever have. And
mm,
so seeing what happens when we're on the Hill, like I'm going to do that more and more and more. Not that I was never like not interested, but I think everybody else is starting to see like, whoa, these people really do exist. And right, there's
yeah,
something impactful. So you're going to see us on the Hill more. I think you're going to see some really cool collaborative efforts among pro-life organizations who each can talk about these various intersections, right? Of we all have a part that we know and that is our lane, right? So let us do our thing and join with other people who are doing their thing to show the big picture. That's magic. It's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
But I think what we're going to see is more opportunities to have conversations about this. Any bill
mm,
is an opportunity to educate. So the
yeah,
more they, try to keep us away from knowing the truth and people hearing the truth, the more we're going to have an opportunity to educate. And we're
Yeah.
going to get there. And I think, the huge
Awesome.
piece is Democrats who, by and large, vote against Born Alive and dehumanize us. There's one pro-life Democrat, shout out to Henry Cuellar out of Texas, who continues to vote for Born Alive legislation. And so I wanted to give a shout out to the Democrats who do vote for it and figure out ways to build bridges to other Democrats and help them hopefully understand that this is not a partisan issue.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a human issue. Bottom line. I can't even believe. I mean, the vote that was taken in the US House of Representatives to see that it was pretty much down party line. I looked at that entire party and look, I'm not even meaning to make this about Republican or Democrat. It's been made
Right.
as a Republican Democrat issue. It's so sad to me because this is common sense. Why would you not provide this? And if you feel like it's redundant, so what? Why would you not stand on principle and say,
Right.
this is part of the fabric of our nation to stand with life? Again, it's absolutely mind blowing to me, Melissa. So,
Well,
so
what I'm
grateful.
asking them to consider is so you want to say it didn't happen. Well, okay, so
Mm,
just let's get some reporting requirements. And PS, could you just agree with me that moms who go through this need quality medical and mental health care and then ongoing parental support as they're raising their child? Like, can we not find something to agree on? So
yeah,
hopefully we'll find something to agree on.
absolutely. Well, in closing here, how can people find you, Melissa, and the Abortion Survivors Network? And then what's next for you guys?
Yeah, find us at abortionsurvivors.org. You can find us all of our handles on social media at that. We are doing a lot of cross training with other organizations to really talk about storytelling and advocacy. We do a great job in our movement sharing stories related to our mission, which is important, but we
Mm,
haven't really seen what the abortion industry does, which is really consistent storytelling. And they have a lot of organizations that feed the cycle,
yeah.
right? They open the gate,
Yep.
share your story, and that's what happens. And it's difficult for us in the pro-life movement because we love the people who've been hurt, but we can do all
Yeah.
those things. So that's what you're going to see us working on more. We're launching an initiative with Choose Life Marketing called My
Mm,
Body, My Voice, where we're going to share the stories of people whose experiences don't fit the predominant cultural narrative of abortion and start to
yeah.
really encourage people to have some cognitive dissonance about where they stand on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. I have to admit, Melissa, as I listen to you talk, I am not usually rendered speechless. And I just continue to be in awe of you and your community, the power of your words, your presence, one look across the aisle, you would hope that that would be enough. And I just pray that these hearts of stone that are on one side of the aisle right now, and again, thanks be to God for that one, Texas congressman. I'm so proud of my great state of Texas. I'm not surprised he's from Texas,
I
right?
was waiting for you to say, like, of course it's Texas.
Course he's from the promised land. Of course he's from Texas. So, um, but I just pray that these hearts of stone become hearts of flesh again.
Mhm.
I pray that people understand that this is not a political issue. This is not a slogan, that these are real human lives. And I think you give witness and evidence to that in a way that I never could on a podcast or standing on a stage or even standing in front of an abortion facility. You are the evidence that this is a human rights issue. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for your life and for your community. And I just pray a blanket of healing upon all those new survivors who are just finding out that they're part of this community, right? That they're set free in Christ and that they know that they were meant to be here, that we love them, that we welcome them, that they are wanted, And we're just cheering you on. I'm so grateful for what you guys have accomplished in the short amount of time that you've been around. So thank you, Melissa. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, so good. Oh, wow. What a powerful testimony. And folks, I hope that you will share this podcast far and wide, not for the sake of the Laura Musica show, but for the sake of Melissa's voice, to give evidence to the fact that this group exists, that we do get to hear from the baby, right? So powerful. Well, closing thought. When it comes to abortion survivors, I've often thought to myself, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. When we see the real faces and names of those who we almost lost to abortion, when I see Melissa, I just experience a range of emotions. How can we as a country, as a human race, say that abortion is okay? How can we look at Melissa or anyone else in her community clearly irreplaceable and say that for the sake of choice, that they shouldn't be here? Oh, I remember watching an episode of the old Hannity and Colmes show. I don't know if some of you remember that years ago used to be on the Fox News network. The show was set up as a debate between conservative Sean Hannity and liberal Alan Colmes. And famous abortion survivor and speaker Gianna Jessen came on to share her story. And when it was Alan Colmes' turn to interview her and to say something, so Hannity had just finished, passed the baton to Alan. He looked at her, and I remember having a moment. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is an ardent supporter of abortion. What is he going to say to her, right? How do you argue with Gianna? She is a living witness to what is so wrong about his line of thinking. And I remember when it was his turn to speak, all he could do was look at her and just thank her for her very personal story. I mean, again, what do? You look into her eyes and say, what? You still believe in choice? I mean, she just sucked all the air out of the room in the right way. She humanized the debate in a way that no one ever could with one human look. Revelation 12:11 says, they conquered him, meaning the evil one, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Real human story. Again, it's so hard to argue with. What is Planned Parenthood going to say back? These are the stories that we need to be getting out to our friends and neighbors. So please, please, please share this podcast far and wide. Let's ensure that this doesn't remain some sort of distant political debate, but we all come to realize that it's the most human battle discussion, the most important one that we could ever have. It is a battle for our very soul, our ethics, and our nation. So yes, Lord have mercy on us. May we all come to have compassion, yes, for the woman facing an unexpected pregnancy and the life of her precious child. With that, thank you all so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Musica Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Facebook page, YouTube channel, and then wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody.